Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you've been having a very great morning. My name's Jessica Ocker, and I'll be hosting this afternoon session. So I'm going to dive right in and introduce you to the amazing keynote speaker we have for today. Dr. Emily Grossman is an internationally acclaimed science author, public speaker, and TV personality with a degree in natural sciences from the Cambridge University and a PhD in cancer research. She's best known as a science expert on TV shows and has been on shows such as Sky One Ducks Quacks Don't Echo, ITV's The Alan Titchmarsh Show, and Discovery Channel How Do They Do It? And for her inspirational talks in schools, universities, and at live events such as the Hay Festival, the Science Museum, and the Cheltenham Science Festival. A passionate advocate for equality and diversity in science, Emily has delivered a TEDx talk on why science needs people who cry, and was recently named the second honorary science ambassador alongside astronaut Team Peak, for her pioneering work in science education and as a role model to young people. Go. She's also the author of best-selling children's book, Brain Fizzing Facts, Awesome Science Questions Answered, which has recently been shortlisted for the Tech Primary Book Awards 2020. Congratulations. Over the past 18 months, Emily has dedicated her life to raising awareness about what's going on our planet and what we can all do to help. She's one of the founders of the group Scientists for Extinction Rebellion, and is the lead author of their free, easy-to-read online guide to the climate and ecological crisis, Emergency on Planet Earth. Hand it over to you, Emily.
Hi, Jessie. Thank you. Thank you for that lovely introduction. It's really lovely to be here.
Thank you for coming on. So tell us, how did you get into this space of science? What led you into becoming a scientist?
Well, really, since as young as I can remember, my favourite word was why. I was like that kid who was constantly asking questions. It was like, what does this mean? How does this work? Why does this happen? Why do I have to do this? I used to drive my teachers and my parents completely bonkers. And it was from quite a young age, luckily, that I was supported and encouraged to keep asking these questions. And I realised that actually that's what kind of maths and science is all about. It's about figuring out the world, making sense of the world, trying to understand things, not accepting anything without an explanation. And that's what I love about science. It's about problem solving and trying to figure stuff out. So at school, I quite quickly kind of became quite into maths and science. But I also had another passion, and my other passion was theatre. So I loved singing and dancing and performing on stage. And like back in those days, I had these really annoying people in my life who'd be like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I was like, well, obviously, I want to be a scientist and I want to be an actress. And they were like, well, you can't do that. You have to choose. And I'm like, I don't want to have to choose. That's really dull. Luckily, I much later, found out that that wasn't the case. But at the time, I certainly had to choose at least which way to kind of specialise, because I wanted to go to university, I wanted to study. So I was like, okay. So I got some great advice, which was like, study the academic route first. So in my case, that was science, and keep the other stuff on. Don't drop it. Don't stop doing the theatre and the singing and the dancing. Keep it going, but kind of as a university kind of choice to choose to go down the science route, because it would be harder to come back to science later, which was really, really good advice. So I applied to study natural sciences at Cambridge, and I was super excited to get a place. But I won't, I'm not going to lie. It's not always been like that easy for me. I mean, in the sense that like I got into science because I loved asking questions, but it was pretty hard at school. I mean, I had some really lovely friends, but on the whole, I wasn't that popular. I got quite bullied and I got kind of quite picked on. That's called like a swot and a teacher's pet because I liked science and because I liked studying and I liked learning. And like it really like it kind of was really hard to keep going. And I say that because I know that happens to a lot of young people. And in fact, it happens to a lot of us throughout our career. There's still times now where I feel so like I haven't got confidence, or I don't really know what I'm doing, and I'm really worried that I'm not good enough, or that like the opinions of other people kind of make me feel kind of down on myself sometimes. But I'm really glad that I kept going and like But it can be hard, particularly if you do like science and you do like studying, because there's this sort of old-fashioned image of what it is to be a scientist, right? Like, if I was to say to you, Jessie, like, okay, just straight off, just bring to mind, conjure up an image of a scientist. Like, what do you think of?
Einstein.
Exactly. So, right?
An old white male who has white hairs and just in a lab coat.
This is my point, right? I mean, not only is this image completely wrong, I mean, I'm a scientist, loads of like very different people to that are scientists, but it's really, really damaging because it gives us this impression that scientists are kind of, the image of a scientist is a male, white, kind of old. And if I was to ask you, what would be the personality of this mythical, complete nonsense image of a scientist, right? Einstein, yes, of course, Einstein looked like that, but there's way more scientists than him. So if I was to ask you, what is this mythical scientist, what's his personality like? What's he like as a human being? What would you say? This stereotypical image of science.
Say dull, boring. He's not energized. Very know-it-all, and just I wouldn't want to sit down with him longer than 2 minutes.
Exactly. And this is what we're up against, because that's complete nonsense. And there's so many different types of people doing science careers. And actually science, yes, it's about problem solving and analysing and thinking. And, maybe that's part of the stereotype image. But there's so much more to being a scientist. So like, if I was to say to you, okay, I know you're not a scientist yourself, but if you were to think, actually, aside from problem solving and analysing, what other skills and qualities do you reckon it might take in order to be a scientist, or what might make a good scientist? So what other qualities do you think science needs?
So I studied pharmaceutical and cosmetics at uni, and I would say for me it was a lot of why, asking questions and investigating, and having that hunger to want to know more. So I think it's just being inquisitive that helps usually.
That's a really important one, curiosity. And that's not just about kind of solving problems and doing maths. I love maths, I love solving problems, but it's just about curiosity. But connected to that, a word that often people think of when it comes to actually, when we think deeper about what is a scientist, is like imagination, right? Yeah. It's about coming up with ideas, it's about creativity, it's about solving problems, but coming at problems from a different direction, thinking of new ways of thinking about like old problems so that we can find solutions. And another word that actually people think of less really to do with science, because the image is sort of an old man on his own in his laboratory, but actually science is all about teamwork. It's about collaboration, it's about coming together, sharing ideas, knowing and understanding other people, working with others, with groups. Sometimes it's working on your own, but sometimes it's really useful to be a people person, somebody who's likes to communicate and engage with others. And the third thing that often people don't think about science is that it's really important to be compassionate, to be caring, because science, like all jobs really, is about trying to help the world. It's about trying to make a difference, trying to do good things in the world, whether that's inventing new medical equipment, or whether it's finding solutions to energy crisis, or whether it's like curing diseases. There's so many different ways to be a scientist that involve heart, that involve caring. And again, that's often overlooked. So what I think is really important is that we really show that anyone can be happy and successful in a science-related career, a STEM-related career, no matter what kind of personality you are. Because one of the main reasons that people, and it happened to me, I lost my confidence. I found myself thinking that I was too sensitive, too emotional. I'm a very emotional person. I cry all the time. But thinking that I was just not tough enough, not strong enough, not like male enough, maybe even, or not, and not even male in the sort of, but in the archetypal sense. And I don't mean that, because of course lots of boys and men are actually super emotional, super sensitive, but we've sort of had it drummed out of us by society to say that that's what girls are soft and what boys are tough. That's complete nonsense. But my point is that we need to start thinking about the fact that science is it's welcoming for a huge range of people of different qualities. And the main reason that people don't go into STEM careers and this is particularly girls, but it happens to a lot of boys too, is not because they think they're not good enough, because actually most people actually are when it comes down to it, or not because they think that, not because they don't like science, but actually because they think, oh, STEM careers is just not for someone like me. Now, what does that mean, right? In my case, it was like, not for someone who's really into theatre, or not for someone who cries a lot, or not for. But that's now I've kind of finally come out the other side, because I actually ended up dropping the physics part of my degree. I started off wanting to be a physicist, and I ended up dropping out of that because I fell foul to that. I fell foul to thinking maybe I wasn't tough enough and strong enough, because I lost my confidence. Because I was surrounded, yes, at that time, mostly by boys, and a lot of them were very confident, or at least they seemed very confident. And again, this isn't a gender divide, whether you're male, female, or something somewhere in between. It's more about the stereotypes. So I started to feel that I wasn't good enough.
You just mentioned that when did you drop physics? Was this in secondary school? Was this in,
Yeah, so I started my degree at Cambridge in physics.
Wow.
I started, to begin with, I was sort of like, yeah, this is going to be great. And then I really started to lose my confidence, because the boys were all like laughing and joking, and they seemed to know the answers, and they started to kind of like roll their eyes at me if I asked questions and stuff. And I don't want to put anyone off, this type of environment it was just unfortunate that I was in that. That could be happening to you right now in secondary school. It could be happening to you at 20 years' time in your career, where you're in an environment that for whatever reason, you start to feel that you're worried to ask questions, or you're worried to get things wrong, or you're worried you're not good enough. Exactly. And I started to feel like that. And because no one had talked to me about this, no one had told me that a lot of people feel like this all the time, I started to think it was my fault. I started to think, well, I just wasn't good enough. So I just thought, well, I'm just obviously not clever enough anymore. I'm not physicsy enough to do this. And I just decided to drop the course. But the irony was, I still had to sit the physics exam at the end of the year, and I came out of that exam in tears, thinking I'd failed it all. And the boys were laughing and joking. And again, forgive me for generalising. I'm sure there's a lot of boys out there who aren't like that, and maybe there's some girls out there who are like that. And let's look at ourselves here. But and there's nothing wrong with being like that, but it's also about being inclusive of everybody else as well. But the irony was, when the results came out, I actually did better than most of the boys. By that point, though, Jessie, I'd lost my confidence so much that I still didn't do physics. So, I often wonder, what would have happened if I'd carried on, or if I'd had some support from male or female tutors to kind of say, this happens a lot. It happens at all stages of careers. I do a lot of, used to before lockdown, I used to do a lot of talks in schools where you've got the whole school there and the head teacher and everything. And I'd say, put your hands up if actually you feel that there's times in your life, in your education or in your career, where you feel not good enough, that you feel you don't fit in, that you're going to be found out, that actually you just sort of blagged your way in. And it's always exactly, it's called imposter syndrome. And it's always the teachers, particularly the head teacher, who's putting their hands up at this point. So, I'm inviting you, if you're watching this now, and in the classroom, if you're brave enough, put your hand up if you actually feel that sometimes. And even if you're the teacher, put your hand up if you ever feel that sometimes, because it's sometimes.
I'm getting questions coming in. And really asking about your book. I think we have 14 minutes left.
Great.
And I'm getting questions about your book from Scarlett and so they really want to hear about your book. Great. And what's in the book, the contents, what they should look out for, what they should be excited about.
Great. Okay, so this is my book, Brain Fizzing Facts, which is my baby. It's doing really, really well. It's just been shortlisted for the Teach Primary Book Awards, but it actually goes all the way up to sort of age 13, 14. And in fact, I've had a lot of older teenagers and a lot of adults saying to me that that's their guilty pleasure and they love it. So what I thought I'd do is just tell you a couple of facts from the book, and then also tell you a little bit about book 2, which is coming out in May. So we just received the cover of book 2, which is super exciting. So I'm just going to show you a little sneak preview. It's literally just come to me. Oh, where's it gone? So this is the well, it's not quite the sequel, but you don't have to have read book 1, but that's World Whizzing Facts. Can you see that there? That's going to be coming out in May. And that's I'm really excited about that one as well, because in that one, I've talked a lot more about what's going on the planet and about helping young people to understand what's going on in terms of climate change, in terms of wildlife loss, but most importantly, what we can do about it. So it's still the same format, which is a fun quiz book full of like multiple choice questions. Like it's really beautifully illustrated by Alice Boucher. She's done some really cool black and white illustrations. And I take you through for each of them 4 possible answers. And then I give you an explanation about why the others are not quite true and why the final one is. And I talk a lot as well about how it's really important in science that we realise it's okay to get stuff wrong. It's okay to have a guess and make a mistake and get it wrong, because that's the way we get to the actual answer. So it's all about just having a go.
Can we have a taste?
Go on.
A quiz, a taster from one of the quiz questions?
Yeah. Okay, so the first one I was going to try with you is, did you know that you can block a tickle?
You can block a tickle. Okay, I'm going to ask everyone in the audience, whether you're in your schools or at home using a device, to give a yes or no as to whether or not you can block a tickle. Any responses?
So the question is actually any suggestions as to how to block the tickle. So it's true you can block a tickle, but any suggestions as to how? I'm not going to give you multiple choice on this one because it will be a bit more challenging because we're doing this online. So any suggested responses how to block a tickle?
It may be, the responses might be slightly delayed. Okay, go on, give us the answer, because I think we're slightly delayed on my side.
So let me give you a clue, Jessie. Have you ever tried to tickle yourself?
No, I normally get tickled by my siblings.
Okay, try it. What happens?
I start and I start laughing, don't I? Yeah.
Really? No, seriously. Most people can't tickle themselves. That is like a scientifically known thing. Like when you get over the fear around it, right? Try and tickle your feet. Try and tickle your underarms. It actually doesn't tickle.
It's a sensational feeling. I think it's a sensational feeling. It makes me feel uncomfortable.
Okay, fair, but it doesn't actually tickle, right?
Yeah.
So it doesn't make you laugh. And that's because there's a part of our brain that's evolved to be able to block the tickly feelings when it's our own hands on our own skin, which makes sense because back in like caveman days, if there was a tickly feeling on our skin, it was likely to be some kind of creature who might bite us or sting us or scratch us. So we evolved to be ticklish so that we could go and flick it away and get rid of it. But imagine what would happen if we felt ticklish every time anything touched our skin, including our own hands. Like we'd fall about laughing every time we put on our shoes and socks. Like that was a bit of an annoyance. So that part of our brain evolved to be able to block the tickly feelings when it's our own hands on our own skin by making a quick prediction about how it's going to feel so that we don't feel ticklish. Wow. So using that information, if I know that I can't tickle myself, if you were going to tickle me, to be able to block the tickly feelings, I would need to trick my brain into thinking that your hands doing the tickling were actually my hands. So one way we could do this is for me to put my hands on your hands as you start to tickle me. And then my brain's going to actually be able to predict how your hands are going to feel because it thinks they're my hands. And then it's a tickle. It's complete magic. I mean, there's occasional people who are so ticklish that even this doesn't work. But most people will be able to block a tickle this way. You don't have to punch the other person. You don't have to like tell them to go away. But actually you can do it just using your hands.
Oh, that's super cool.
That's my favourite fact. And I thought I'd tell you another. So that's in Brain Fizzing Facts, the first book. And I thought I'd tell you another from Brain Fizzing Facts, which is that did you know that there is a creature that can breathe through its bottom? Now, for this one, I'm going to give you multiple choice answers like I do in the book. So 4 possible answers for this one. So if you're watching in the classroom or if you're watching on your own computer, you can put your hands up and vote for your teacher, or you can type into the chat box as to which you think is the right answer. So creature that can breathe through its bottom. Number 1, could it be a pufferfish? Number 2, could it be a type of frog? Number 3, could it be a form of dolphin? Or number 4, could it be a form of turtle? So 1 was pufferfish, 2, where was I? 2 was a type of frog, 3 was a type of dolphin, 4 was a type of turtle.
Oh, I'm waiting for responses to come in. I wouldn't
You
think...
have a guess, Jessie, and then I'll take you through it.
I wouldn't think it's a turtle. I feel like dolphins wouldn't do such things. I think
How does a dolphin, Jessie, how does a dolphin breathe?
I wouldn't even know. Don't they breathe from the top of their? Isn't there a hole on top?
Exactly. Exactly right. Well done. So they have this hole on the back of their head, on the back of their sort of back, called a blowhole, and they suck in air when they come to the surface. They don't have to put their mouth above water because actually they don't breathe through their mouths. They suck in air through the blowhole, and then they take it into their lungs, and then they scoosh the old air out, and together with any water that's got inside, and it comes out like a sort of turbocharged snot out the top of their head. It's pretty cool. Don't go near it when it does that because it's pretty snotty. So it's not a dolphin. What other ones? So what did you think about the pufferfish? How do fish breathe?
I don't know what a pufferfish looks like. Could you give a quick description? We've got 7 minutes left.
Actually, I was kind of using that as an example of fish in general. So how do fish in general breathe? Do they breathe through their mouth?
Their gills on the side of their...
So they have flat skin on the side of their body. They don't, strictly speaking, breathe. They actually absorb oxygen from the water through the flaps of skin, take it into their bloodstream so they can carry out respiration in their bloodstream. So no bottoms involved. Okay, so that leaves us with a frog and a turtle.
Yeah. I would say it's the frog.
Okay, so frogs have an interesting way of breathing. When they're on land, they're amphibians, which means they can be in land and water. When they're on land, they take in air through their mouth, just like humans, just like mammals, and breathe into their lungs and exchange the gases in a process of gas exchange. Then they do respiration in their cells, and eventually the air comes back out of their lungs, out of their mouth, and that's normal breathing. Okay. When they're in water, however, they breathe using something else. Any idea what? It's not their bottom.
No.
Using their skin. So their skin is coated in water, which is why they're slimy, and they absorb oxygen into that water. They absorb the oxygen from that water, just like a fish actually, through their skin. So it's like their skin is like one big gill, and that allows them to live in water as well. So that leaves us with a turtle. Wow. Now, there is a type of turtle that lives in very, very cold areas, and it spends a lot of its time in such cold areas that it needs to hibernate to keep warm during the winter. Now, a lot of turtles hibernate anyway, but this one hibernates for a long time, for like 3 to 4 months. And because it's so cold, it's actually warmer under the surface of a frozen lake than it is on the land. So, as like frogs, when turtles are on the land, they can breathe through their mouths. When they're swimming in water, they have to surface and breathe through their mouths. But when they're hibernating under the frozen surface of the lake, they switch to a different type of breathing, or strictly speaking, respiration, involving taking in water through a hole in their bottom. It's actually called a cloaca, and they bring in the water, they absorb the oxygen through the walls of the inside of their little sacs inside their cloaca hole, and then they scoosh the water back out. And they do this pretty rapidly, about 30 times or 60 times actually every minute, like once a second. And that means that they can still absorb oxygen and do respiration, even when they're hibernating for long periods of time and they're not above the surface of the water. So turtles are pretty cool.
I love that. And do you know what? St. James, Miriam from St. James suggested turtles. She did guess turtles. So well done to Miriam.
Awesome.
And St. James. Emily, I just want to quickly ask, where can we get your new book from? Where can, there's people asking in the chat box where can they get their book? Where can they get more information about what you're doing as well?
Yeah, great question. So the Brain Fizzing Facts is out at the moment. You can get that on pretty much any online retailer. You can get it through Amazon. You can get it through Bloomsbury, which is the name of the publishers. You can just order it online. World Whizzing Facts is available already to pre-order, and again through the same methods. You can do that through Amazon, or you can do that through Bloomsbury, the online website for the publisher. So you can pre-order that online, and you can get Brain Fizzing right now, and it hopefully should be with you in a few days.
Okay. That's great, Emily. And my last question to you is that we have over 1,000 young girls online right now who are students, probably studying STEM subjects. What advice would you give them if they are looking to do their PhD, if they're looking to further their education, further their knowledge in the whole STEM industry, what would you suggest they do, and how could they keep up the resilience through all the challenges that are to come?
Yeah, that's a really important question. So as I said earlier, it's really important as girls that we realise that science and STEM subjects are for everyone. You know, there's this idea that maybe we're a bit too something, and it's about keeping going, and it's about remembering that actually science is such a fascinating subject. It's such a useful subject for understanding about the world. When I say science, I mean all the STEM subjects, and technology, engineering, mathematics, and that it's really important that we just keep believing in ourselves, because time and time and time again, studies show that even when girls are saying I'm not good enough or it's not for me, that actually the results show that we are. That the in terms of finding out what people's interests are, again, the studies show that actually girls particularly are really interested in these subjects. But actually it's just about pushing through that stereotype. So it's about remembering that there are times for everybody when we feel not good enough, where we feel we're alone, where we feel we don't fit in. I've spent most of my life feeling different, feeling weird, because being a scientist, being called a geek, also I'm autistic, so being like feeling different in the way my brain thinks. I also got ADHD, feeling like I don't fit in. But actually, you know, as long as I've got a couple of good friends who I can talk to, it's really important also to talk to people in your life, like your friends, if that feels right, or maybe an adult, could be a family member, could be a teacher, could be a counsellor, to get support. And let's just start talking in our schoolrooms as well, in our classrooms, about the fact that it's okay to sometimes be worried, to sometimes feel scared. And if we look around, you know, when I said earlier, put your hands up if you sometimes feel like that, you know, I dare you to be brave enough right now to put your hand up in case no one did it before, and look around at how many people actually do feel worried. They're feeling different, feeling weird, feeling like you don't fit in, feeling like you're not good enough. And 100%. That is the main thing that we just need to actually realise. We all feel like this. We're all struggling. We're all scared sometimes. And we all just need to realise that nobody really knows what they're doing. The older I get and the more successful I get in my career, the more I realise that nobody really knows what they're doing and that we're all just trying our best. So just remember that science is fun. It's creative, it's about imagination, it's about teamwork, it's about doing your best. And it doesn't matter, you don't have to be the absolute best to be successful in science. It's as you said, Jessie, the most important thing is curiosity, a desire to understand and make sense of the world, and hopefully make the world a better place. And that's what's important to me, is that I'm using my science now to talk about climate change and the environment, because I passionately feel that that's a way to make changes in the world. And there's so many ways, studying STEM subjects, that we can make the world a better place.
Dr. Emily, you have been phenomenal. I am following you on Twitter. I've just gone and followed you just now. Please, just tell
Twitter.
us.
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram. You can find me at Dr. Emily Grossman on Twitter and at Dr. Emily Grossman 1 on Instagram. And you can also find me through my website, emilygrossman.co.uk.
Star. Awesome. Thank you so much for giving us your time today. I hope everyone enjoyed the session with Dr. Emily, and look forward to the next session.